In the shadowed towns of South Texas, where dusty roads stretch into Mexico and communities cling to a fragile sense of safety, the name Jose Bustos-Diaz became a whispered warning. His story reads like a nightmare. A man whose crimes, escapes, and ruthless behavior turned his life into a real-life house of horrors. Convicted of murder, accused of another, a fugitive from the law, and a man who carried fear like a weapon, Bustos-Diaz remains one of the most dangerous fugitives to have ever eluded justice. Jose Bustos-Diaz was no stranger to violence. Long before his name landed on wanted posters, he had already shown signs of brutality. He was convicted of murder in Texas, handed a 35-year prison sentence that should have kept him behind bars for most of his adult life. For the victims' families, the conviction offered a grim but necessary closure. But closure did not last, because Bustos-Diaz had something more terrifying than a violent streak. He had a talent for slipping through the cracks of the system. It wasn't just once that he evaded justice. Authorities recall multiple run-ins with law enforcement, each encounter escalating in violence. FBI records detail threats against federal officers, physical assaults on police, and a long list of suspected criminal activities. From drug-related violence to local intimidation that kept communities living in fear. The people who knew him, who saw his face or crossed his path, often stayed silent, afraid of what might happen if they spoke up. In neighborhoods touched by his violence, Bustos-Diaz became a ghostly presence, not always seen but always feared. When the FBI and U.S. Marshals closed in on him in the early stages of their investigations, they found themselves chasing a man who seemed always one step ahead. Bustos-Diaz was arrested more than once, but time and again he managed to slip away. His cunning, combined with what authorities believed to be help from friends and family on both sides of the border, made him nearly impossible to contain. It was this network of loyalty, secrecy, and fear that turned his case into one of the most haunting unresolved manhunts in Texas history. The most infamous chapter of his story came with his escape from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice in Frio County. Alongside another inmate, he broke free from custody and fled south toward Mexico. The escape was bold and humiliating for authorities, proof that even the most secure systems could fail. Within hours, Bustos-Diaz had disappeared across the border, beyond the easy reach of U.S. law enforcement. And as if to mock the system that had once caged him, he became the prime suspect in yet another murder, this one occurring after his escape. Every detail about him is burned into wanted bulletins. His face scarred with acne, a heart tattoo with a cross on his left hand. Vanessa inked across his left wrist, Lizette scrawled into his right. These tattoos were meant to make him stand out, and yet Bustos-Diaz used them as camouflage, slipping into communities where fear kept people from pointing him out. His reputation did the silencing for him. The FBI, U.S. Marshals, and local police all pursued him relentlessly. Posters were plastered across towns, his name was broadcast in news reports, and eventually, a reward of up to $25,000 was offered for information leading to his capture. But despite the money, despite the warnings, and despite his distinct features, no one has stepped forward to deliver him. Investigators believe this silence isn't from ignorance. It's from fear and loyalty. Friends and family are believed to have shielded him, giving him safe houses, money, and transport, both in Mexico and possibly even within the U.S. Communities where Bustos-Diaz once walked still remember the tension he created. Parents kept children close. Neighbors locked their doors, and whispers traveled faster than the law. To many, he became more than a fugitive. He became a myth of terror, a reminder that even when law enforcement promises justice, some monster slipped through. His crimes, his threats, and his escapes created scars that linger far beyond his last confirmed sighting. And that's where the greatest mystery lies. How does a man with such a violent history remain hidden for so long? How has he managed to evade not just the FBI and U.S. Marshals, but also the lure of a $25,000 cash reward? Has he created a new life for himself in Mexico, buried in communities where no one dares to speak his name? Or is he still drifting between shadows in the United States, protected by a web of loyalty that refuses to break? The story of Jose Bustos-Diaz remains unresolved, unfinished, and deeply disturbing. He is a convicted murderer, a suspected killer again, a man who has threatened federal officers, assaulted law enforcement, and terrorized those around him. A fugitive whose tattoos, scars, and name should have made him easy to catch, but whose cunning and connections have kept him free. This is more than just an escape story. It is a story of a man whose life has become a house of horrors for those who cross his path, and a warning for the communities that still whisper his name. His violence is not forgotten, his crimes are not erased, and his presence is not gone. Somewhere out there, he remains, and so the questions linger. How many more crimes has he committed while on the run? Who exactly is shielding him, and how far are they willing to go? What dark truths remain buried in the silence of those who know more than they are saying? And perhaps the most chilling of all, when Jose Bustos-Diaz is finally found, will it be too late for his next victim? In the shadowed towns of South Texas, the name Jose Bustos-Diaz still sparks fear. Convicted of murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison, he should have spent most of his life behind bars. Instead, his story became one of the most haunting fugitive sagas in modern Texas history. A chilling tale of violence, escape, and unanswered questions. Bustos-Diaz was no ordinary criminal. Known for his violent temper, threats against federal agents, and history of assaulting law enforcement, he left behind a trail of intimidation that paralyzed communities. Authorities believe his ties ran deeper than anyone imagined, with friends and family providing him money, shelter, and ways to vanish undetected. What made him especially terrifying wasn't just his crimes. It was his ability to slip away from justice time and again. The most infamous moment came in Frio County, Texas, where Bustos-Diaz and another inmate staged a daring escape from custody. In hours, he disappeared, leaving broken chains and shattered confidence in a system that failed to contain him. Soon after, he was named a prime suspect in yet another murder, deepening the horror surrounding his name. Distinct tattoos, a heart with cross on his left hand, Vanessa on his left wrist, Lizeth on his right, along with facial acne scars, should have made him easy to spot. Yet, year after year, he remained a shadow. Law enforcement flooded the region with wanted posters, and a $25,000 reward was offered for information, but silence dominated. Some feared retaliation, others were loyal, and many whispered that he created a hidden life across the border in Mexico. For families of victims, the silence was unbearable, a reminder that the man who destroyed lives was still free. Until then, his story remains a chilling reminder of what happens when justice fails, and a warning that real-life horrors don't always stay locked behind prison walls.